Pradeep, do you think we should start? You're muted, Pradeep.
So another 3-4 minutes, if it's okay, because
Yeah,
we expect 5 minutes of people pouring in.
sure.
Another 2 minutes and we start, sir. We'll just wait for 2 more minutes.
I think let's start, Pradeep.
Yeah, please. We can start with you.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Mr. Praveen, Director of Meritor, my NOB colleagues, past presidents, fellow foundermen, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a pleasure to welcome you all to this valuable conference on the hot topic, namely exports. In this period of rising corona, I first of all wish you all safety and good health. Well, it seems like coexistence is the only solution currently till we have a vaccine and alternatives. So we all need to ensure that we all traverse safely through this arduous and uncertain times ahead of us. My best wishes to each of you to stay safe and healthy and come out a winner. At the outset, I would like to appreciate the efforts of Mr. Prem Kumar, Director Sales at Nelcast, for helping IIF reach out to Mr. Praveen. I also appreciate Mr. Praveen's willingness to support the Indian Foundries by sharing his valuable insights of the fiercely competitive export markets. We have stated this on many forums, and I repeat it for some people who have joined new, that India's share in the global market is just a meager 3%. In fact, it's below 3%. It's some 2.odd%. Opportunities are plenty. It's a question of getting your business model right. The entry barrier to exports is definitely initially very high, but the upside is that once you entrench yourself into these markets, displacement or disruption is normally not often, and you stay there for a long period. The anti-China rhetoric decibels seem to be rising by the day, and is being now heard across the country. It has risen more with the recent border developments, which all of you are aware of, and the Indians' stance on anti-China seems to be hardening by the minute. But China is undoubtedly our biggest competitor and leads us by miles in the global markets. This lead, which seemed almost impossible to visualize by all of us till recently, now seems to have come within our sights with the rising global anti-China sentiments. Today's topic, global vision and local roots, very apt, will lend us insights into how to strike, as the time to strike is now, and our window will be short. India will not have a very long window to strike, so we need to strike now. Mr. Praveen will walk us through what it takes to tread on that path to success. Format is the speaker will present for about 30 minutes, after which we'll have a Q&A. Request participants to post their questions in the chat box. I have pleasure in inviting my colleague on the NOB, Mr. Vijay Beriwal, the current Vice President of the Institute of Indian Foundries, to introduce the speaker. Mr. Beriwal, over to you.
Hello, Mr. President, NOBs, fellow foundrymen, and Mr. Praveen. Due to the shift of focus of world market to locate new vendors beyond China, which has created a thirst among Indian foundrymen to grab this opportunity or to explore the avenues to export their castings to global market. Today's speaker, Mr. Praveen KV, will definitely quench our thirst. Mr. Praveen is a graduate in mechanical engineering from Bangalore University. His progressive and performance-driven leadership with nearly 28 years of experience had made its own space in strategic sourcing, operations management, project management, and cost-cutting initiatives. He, at Meritor Incorporation, a global auto major, since last 13 years leading a team of professionals in India, Australia, and China. Having the responsibility for establishing the strategy direction and priorities for the global sourcing and purchasing functions in Asia Pacific. Prior to Meritor, he held many leadership and managerial positions in Tyco, Ingersoll Rand, and Arvia Meritor. I'm sure that Mr. Praveen will be instrumental to take us to our goal of make here, sell everywhere. The floor is now to Mr. Praveen KV.
Thank you, Vijay, and thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, Vijay, for a good, nice introduction. I don't know whether I'll be able to completely quench the thirst, but I'll definitely, probably I will make in my honest attempt to show where the water is, if not completely quench the thirst. But at the same time, I would like to thank IIF for organizing this webinar to share my views and perspectives about global picture and what opportunity that lies, and how is the China things that are being dealt today, and overall what can be the kind of a roadmap for the Indian foundry industry as such. So I will start my presentation. Just a second. I hope everyone is able to see the presentation. So I'll start my presentation with a note from Winston Churchill. This message, basically the reason I wanted to start with this note is to start with on a very positive note, to instill confidence and perhaps provides hope to stay alive, to stay positive by working on the things that are definitely in our control. We know that there are several issues or several initiatives that we can work even during the crisis time that will come very handy when the market recovers. And we all know that it is going to recover. It's a matter of time, and it will certainly come back. And this is the time that we need to kind of ensure that this good crisis, so-called we call it good, this crisis not to go waste, and use this crisis to work on various initiatives. It could be new customers, penetration. We will go through some of that, and that will come probably very handy in the time to come. So with that positive note, I will just go on to how deep is this crisis? What is this? We are all in the middle of this coronavirus, COVID, in this pandemic. Just wanted to give a perspective to all of you. on how we believe or we think that in each of the region, how badly this is impacting, or what is the expected recovery in the times to come. So as you can see, most of the economies in the world are kind of expected here and there anywhere between Q1 to Q2 of 2021. It is going to rise up. It is kind of getting to the bottom of it in the Q1 and Q2 time frame. There are two different scenarios, as you can see there. One is on a severe pandemic where there's going to be 35 plus countries are registering 3,000 plus cases, and then global emergency, which is much more worse. But in all, barring China, we find that, or the general, this is actually coming from, not from me, it has come from Frost and Sullivan. It clearly states that probably in the Q1 to Q2 2021 is the time to look for when we are able to get back to some sort of recovery in this. Moving on, just before I start off with the key things, I just want to introduce my organization, Meritor. Basically, I've been here in Meritor as the Director of Purchasing for Asia Pacific for a little over 13 years now. We have it's a $4.5 billion, basically an automotive mobility company. When I say mobility, we make the trucks, the axles and the brakes and drive lines for trucks, trailer. These are all in the automotive space. We also have industrial, wherein we have three separate wings under industrial for off-highway application, for defense, and also for some of the specialty vehicles. Essentially, the products are the same axles and brakes for a different application. In addition to that, we also have a business wing and aftermarket, which happens to be nearly about 25% of our revenue globally. We have a very strong presence in North America in the aftermarket. We are also driving a lot of initiatives in Europe, in Asia Pacific, especially in India, in the aftermarket side of it. Globally, we have 29 manufacturing locations. This is prior to our acquisition of Axletech and Fabco a year and a couple of years ago. Without that, we had 29 manufacturing locations, about 9 joint ventures across the globe. And then just move on to the next one. What are the key products? As I stated earlier, basically we are in the rear axles. When I say rear, it is primarily rear drive axles. We also have in rear tandem and tridem, which means that there will be second axle and a third axle in the, as you would have seen in the field in the commercial vehicles. We are also quite strong in front axles, both drive and non-drive. We also supply the axles for bus and coach. And then as we move on to the brakes, we have both drum brakes, which is predominantly very high market in North America and in India and China. We are also a market leader in the disc brake, predominantly very high market in Europe. So, and we have also over the last, say, 5 years, we have also gone into the medium duty axles, which are for, let us say, the truck carrying capacity anywhere between under 10 tons capacity. The one thing that I have not shown it here is also on our industrial products, and then aftermarket, which we have a genuine and all make aftermarket products too. That brings me to an interesting one here. Basically, it is the what is our presence in India and in Asia Pacific specifically. I have been in this office global sourcing for nearly about 13 years, and then we established the global sourcing, or what we in our current language we call it as best cost country sourcing, for the last 20 years. And then I also established an office in China for the same objective. And then I'm just laying out here what do we do in India. We are today buying about $218 million, approximately, I would say about 1,700 to 1,800 crores of spend, what we buy from the Indian suppliers. As you see in the bar chart, nearly 80% of our global spend is metals, which majorly, I would say, into three categories: in castings, forgings, and machine components. Out of the $1.7 billion that we have globally, more than 80% is metallic. And I have kind of categorized in that metals what are the key things and how much do we buy from India. We buy forgings, nearly about 30% of the forgings of our $500 million, $500 million. In that, nearly 30% we buy from India. And then same thing on the machine components, which are basically the button, CNC machines, some gears and things like that come in this category. And there also we have kind of penetrated pretty good. But as you can see for this forum, you can really see how are we really penetrated on the castings. Even though we are present in India for more than 20 years, we are still very, very meager, not more than 3% of our global buy we are able to do in India. So this leaves us with an immense opportunity. We have been looking for various foundries in India and looking at the products and things like that. So this leaves us as a good opportunity to look at castings, and we are very much open to look at that. Moving on, I just wanted to, this entire webinar is also going to talk about what opportunities, what limitations, what challenges that we have. I just thought that it would be more appropriate to list out what are the learnings that we have in the past 20 years. Those are all the, I would call it as learnings, but these are all the key enablers for a successful export operations. I would say this, to begin with the world-class manufacturing. I would say these three elements are very important: what systems we have, and what processes we have in the organization, and what is the technology. There has been a lot of discussion especially in investment towards technology part of it, as we look forward for projects like Make in India, and especially when we look at the Western side of it, the technology plays a very important role in getting us closer to the customer requirements and duly understanding the product life cycle and the changes that are required. The technology becomes very, very key here. The next one is the quality and reliability. From India perspective, I can definitely vouch over a period of time. I think the Indian suppliers have got a greater amount of credibility in a sustenance quality side of it, and reliability performance too. But the key is, as we look at some of the, these are all some premier supplier partners. When we look at the tier 2s and much more and under MSME categories, we still face some challenges in some spots. So I think we need to really focus on the quality and reliability part of it. And then I just put this, the third one, especially from the foundry side of it, in terms of safety and environment practices. I think we need to move a big needle here, especially on the environment side of it, and safety of our people, our equipment, as an organization overall. The fourth one is on the global cost competitiveness. I have a separate page talking about the cost competitiveness, but more so, I would like to probably bring upon the attention of the people here on the efficiency side of it. As my experience goes with some of the Chinese foundries and also across the world, I think that there is definitely an opportunity for us to look at on, especially in the foundry side of it, on our efficiencies across all the processes that we have. The next one, the effective program management for flawless launches. This is becoming extremely important. Incidentally, I am also a chair in the ACMA IPO forum, which is basically International Purchasing Office Forum. We find that program management is definitely an area, a thrust that is required, because we normally consider this to be yeah, the program happens, there are a few people who will manage it, but this becomes very, very important in our organization in Meritor. We have to drive a lot of initiative with the suppliers, with their support to what we call it as on time through, when we award a program within the timelines that are given, to ensure that those timelines are met and effectively communicated. This program management becomes extremely, extremely crucial. And I would say that a couple of programs turned effectively, flawlessly, is a great marketing. You need not have to market, especially in the west side of it, on your capabilities. A kind of success through this effective program management helps you to win and then get more and more business globally. Some of the minor irritants that keeps coming is on packaging side of it. We do a great job in delivering the program, in delivering the products, but the last bit of it we sometimes miss. And that is where I feel that the packaging and some minor irritants like rust prevention, burrs and chips have to be really taken care. The last one is, again, this is the last piece of it, and it's more ensuring that whatever that has been developed, awarded the business, that really gets nurtured very well. The supply chain management with very proactive communication, especially when we are dealing with a long distance supply chain. Like we are in India, we are anywhere between 4 weeks to 6 weeks away to a customer and the point of usage. The supply chain management becomes extremely crucial. And more crucial is also ensuring that there is a proper communication ahead of time is provided. So I think I just wanted to cover this just to give a glimpse of what are the key elements that really makes us to be successful in the export side of it. The next one, I just wanted to give a perspective about I coming from the auto component side of it, automotive side of it. What do we do in the automotive exports today? We are growing at a CAGR of about 11-12% over the last years, except that 2020, leaving the 2020, we are at $15.6 billion of auto component exports. I just wanted to also highlight what regions are we supplying today as an India, as a country. Basically focused on Europe and North America. A lot of people are also having the kind of, a premise that North America is definitely a big market, but as you can see, we also have many opportunities in the other countries, especially in the European and also with Mexico and things like that. So overall, I just wanted to conclude here that there is a more opportunity with the mission. Since I come from the automotive, we have a mission now to grow this $15.6 billion to about $45 billion by the year 2025. This was the mission laid out in 2018, 2019. I know that we have a dip now because of COVID, but still, I think this is achievable, at least getting closer to $45 billion in the next 5 years as a country in India. The next one, I just want to give a contrasting to what is happening in China. China is nearly about 8 times bigger than us in terms of the auto component exports. Because of their base being pretty high at about $88 billion, they have not grown at the rate that we are growing, which is also a good indication that we have much more aggressive opportunities that we can take it on. So end of 2019, they did close to about $100 billion, which amounts to about 8% of the global trade in terms of automotive component requirement in the globe. In terms of the regions that they are in, pretty much the same what we have, but as you can see, they are nearly about 20% of that outcome, which so far China is called as the world's factory, is still going to the USA. They have a big chunk in Japan where we do not have much. We can, that's an opportunity that we can really look into. The next one I just wanted to focus on, specifically talking about what are the 5 common products that are in the top 10 exports between India and China? And how much in that top 10 products, how much is India vis-a-vis China? As you can see there, we have the one that I have marked in the red. Those are all the ones where I think the cast components are available, that opportunity is there. We are definitely at least 1/3 or 1/4 of those parts between brakes and the tractors and motor vehicles and on the engine side of it. These are all the products that can be definitely looked at from India side of it. I just wanted to now specifically share about what are all the what cost competitiveness that we have, where India has an advantage or where China has an advantage. I specifically did not make a specific mention of how much we are off. It can be dependent on a particular component, particular region within the China, where the factories are located. But generally, as my experience goes over the last 6-7 years in China, I feel that the input cost, especially in scrap and pig iron, are much more competitive. They do work on machining cost, which is much lower because of the scale, as we just now spoke, that they are anywhere between 8 to any country, for that example, with India too, they are 8 to 9 times bigger. That scale is giving them a big advantage in logistics too. We know that economy of scale and between supply and demand, there is enough capacity available in China. I've seen many in a foundry, like 10 DISA lines, only 2 DISA lines are working, 8 are not even working. So it is the way that they have built up their capacity. So I will not get into the aspect of why they have built such a big capacity, but there is an abundant capacity available. Their energy costs are much lower. This is somewhat like a government aided. There are some specific times of the day, times of the year. There is energy cost being much more lower than almost the wherever in the world itself. There are definitely the government support, which is actually coming down. As I could see, the rebates and incentives, the state-owned companies who can get much more better leverage with the state governments, they have a lot of incentives that were given. But this is coming down. As I'm mentioning, in the other side of it is also on the investment and funding. I'm sorry. On the investment and funding, the government side of it, funding is becoming extremely tight especially over the last 2-3 years. That is my observation. So that is becoming more challenging to them. There are other challenges like the trade barriers, as we all know, especially with the US. The trade barriers it all started with steel, then it went to the auto components. So the trade issues, especially in terms of their ability to manage the trade practices which are globally acceptable, is a challenging environment to them. And that is also posing some real good opportunities to us. The last one, it is more very sentimental, that anti-China. In the introduction, Sanjay was talking about it. The COVID-19 has put in a kind of a greater challenge within China to really face the world on this COVID-19. We are all pretty much up to date on it. I can specifically talk to Meritor. We do have an extensive discussions around what needs to be done in terms of whatever the sourcing that we have. How do we kind of leverage with the other countries, other sourcing? There are doors open for India, doors open for Vietnam, Indonesia, and Thailand, and things like that. So, but there is certainly, I would say, a notional move to look at the sourcing part of in China. As I move to the opportunities, just get back to the auto component sector, but there are definitely opportunities in the agriculture, industrial, and various other sectors too. But I just wanted to highlight here a point here. As we saw, China is doing about 8% of the global trade of about $1,250 billion. We are just about 1.3% here. So the highlight one there is the drive transmission, steering, and engine components. This again reiterates this. Actually, this particular slide is from ACMA, Automotive Component Manufacturing Association. And if you see the region there between Europe, Asia, North America, Latin America, Oceania, and Africa, we are nowhere except Africa. Leaving that, we are nowhere close to 2% of the trade. So there is an immense opportunity available to us, and that is the reason the auto sector has really embarked on to get the CAGR at the same level and then reach about $40 billion of exports from India. Just wanted to highlight a few things on what challenges that we face and where do we really need to look at. Scalability, I see this as a very important element in terms of our ability to scale up when the demand is there. We have always struggled in certain projects that we have worked in Meritor. And this is where I would say that China really scores in terms of their ability to scale up, of course, because of this capacity that they have. But I think many of the foundries that you will also find that this is something that we need to really look at. And then I also wanted to highlight on the penetration. Let me give you an example. We were working with one of the customers. This is specifically in aftermarket. We were working with a customer, a OE customer, and they have their own spare parts division. They challenged us that whatever the price that and the service that we were providing to them was not good enough, and they have been able to look for or get a foundry in China who has been much more cost effective, and then able to service the customer with the range of products that they were able to offer. The point that I was making is not about our customers' ability to source them, but point is about how good the Chinese foundries are able to penetrate into the market and go even with these foundries could be in a tier 2 or a tier 3 level, but they have been able to go into the OE customers and able to penetrate into that segment. So I think that we need to look at and shift our focus in terms of penetration. And then I talked about proliferation. We always struggle here. And I can give some examples here, like drums and rotors that we buy in the commercial vehicles segment. These are all highly proliferated parts, a range of parts that are available that we require. We have been, the reason I said in the beginning of the presentation that we are only less than 3%. Sometimes we struggle in locating who is able to flexibly manufacture to us with so many proliferations we have. And this is only growing with the products that are in the market, that are being in the field. It's only growing. So I feel that this is one area that is, if that is looked upon, we will be able to look at the path towards success in terms of enhancing the exports. The other next point on the development, the process and product innovation and tooling, I would combine this point. We are looking at, again, I'm referencing a lot of things to China. We will be able to, in several things that we have done, whether it is going to be a carrier or a big component weighing anywhere at 100, 120 kilos, we are able to quickly turn around in China. In other words, what I wanted to highlight here, the speed to market, I think that there is enough scope for us to improve upon in India in terms of our ability to bring the product onto the table much more quicker than what we have today being able to do. Certainly, there are certain cost disabilities. We all know the cost of capital in India is pretty high, and we have a logistics, I would say definitely a disability here, and then energy. These are all the things that are really driving to anywhere between 10 to 15% cost disabilities to India. But I will come in the next slide on how the OEs or the tier ones or the customers across the globe look at this differently. And then I just wanted to, next two things I want to also highlight a bit on the overall, not only from the organization side of it, but also on the government side of it. I know that we get really hampered on the labor laws, which are quite inflexible as compared to any other competing countries to us. And then the ease of doing business, especially it has moved up by a significant way, but not to the way our competing countries are there. I talked about the last one earlier on the penetration of global aftermarket, so I just I'll skip that. The last one, just a few thoughts. I'll be ending my presentation after this and open up for question and answers. The first one is just wanted to look at whether India needs to look beyond China as a country and see whether do we need to really go after this. So I have a few thoughts here. Yes, we all know that the China is being called as world factory, but given the various things on the trade and also on the this current pandemic, there is definitely an opportunity. I think that we need to probably look beyond China, not only as a competition, but there are other countries to look at. It can be Vietnam, Indonesia, anything in the South Asia side of it. But I feel that we don't need to really look at China as a threat. There are opportunities, the OEs in the Western market, because of the credibility that the Indian suppliers enjoy. We do, even from a Meritor perspective, I can definitely say that we look at the total cost of ownership, not necessarily the price at the point of implementation of the project, but it is beyond that. So it is involving quality, reliability, service, and various factors that we consider in the total cost of ownership. And I'll also tell you at this point of time, one more on the, especially on China side of it, as we know that the competition is becoming much more closer. I am really happy, you know, in some of the cases, some of them must be hearing this, the foundries may be on this call. We have been able to get some projects awarded in India in competition to China. So the things are, that gives us a good feeling that the things are really slowly drifting towards India as well as the foundry is concerned. And then the last point on this question that I would also like to make is the government of India. I've been fortunately closely involved with certain policies that government of India is looking to come out. There are several, not only these are all incentives based, but there are efficiency improvement initiatives that the government is planning. They know that this is a huge opportunity for India as an export hub, and making this as create this as an India export hub. There are incentives and initiatives being worked on. Hopefully all these will make us or make our Western companies to look India as not as merely as a competitor to China, but beyond that. The next one is China an advantage to Indian industry? With whatever happened on the tariff and also on this pandemic that is going on, I would say there are enough news on the disinvestment in China and things like that. But I still feel, despite that, my comment goes because of this experience. Despite the fact that there was a 25% duty that was imposed on Chinese products almost a year ago, we were not able to get even $1 million program awarded to India because of the tariff barrier. And many of the OEs were able to, some of the OEs were able to absorb, but some of it were also able to absorb with the Chinese suppliers. So at this point of time, I do not feel that this is going to be an immediate advantage to Indian industry. But as I said before, China is only 8% of the trade. We are at 1.3 or 1.2%. We still are able to look beyond China. Don't look at just the China as an advantage. But I would say that there are many more opportunities even looking beyond China. The last one is there is definitely a rise in nationalism, especially the global organizations, including Meritor. We have been looking at do we have a risk on supply chain, especially in this pandemic situation. And there is enough discussions that is ongoing. It is quite a, I would say, quite at the infancy stage at this point of time. Do we have a risk on our global supply chain being long enough, and then such pandemic can create disruptions in the global supply chain? I would say two things. One, yes, this can be one, but one of the mitigations that we have always worked on is on multi-layered sourcing, which means that yes, there could be one on long distance supply chain, one is locally there. So we have always de-risked with a layered option. So that leaves us with still not to be really, let's say, perturbed on this, particularly on this point of it. And then because of that, I strongly believe that India and China, of course, will play definitely a strong role in the global supply chain. So just thought that I will leave that with these thoughts, and I am open for questions. I hope I think I kind of little over time, but I can still take questions if there are any. And then this is how I'll kind of conclude my presentation.
Thank you, Praveen, for the wonderful insights that you've given. You've kind of, but the most interesting thing is that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and it seems to be that there's a hope for India to actually exploit. The numbers look very exciting. That yes, there's a huge opportunity, but like you said, there are also barriers that we need to take care of. So I have two questions, after which I'll hand it over to Mr. Vijay, my colleague, to actually do the Q&A and moderate the Q&A session. One is that, we've all been hearing that people have been looking at alternatives like Vietnam and Indonesia, Bangkok, and other countries, right? Where does India stand in terms of facing this? Because China is already a competition. And so there are some factories like Nike who has shifted to Vietnam, lock, stock, and barrel. Though there has been a news that Japan is encouraging India. But still, what is the threat you think that India has against these countries? Do they have the competency to really give India a run for the money?
Yeah. In my view, I know that including some of the Eastern European countries in this, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Thailand, Philippines, in the auto component sectors, I would say that, and especially I would divide this into the car market, passenger cars and commercial vehicles. Specifically talking about commercial vehicles, I feel that this is not really penetrated because of the two factors. One is the competency, and also on their capability to scale up to the global requirement. So I feel that this is not an immediate threat. It's a point that we need to watch out very carefully, as they are also gearing up. Because once the passenger cars are being much more penetrated upon, they will definitely get that competency, and that we need to probably closely watch out. Specifically in Meritor, we have just started those activities to look at Vietnam and other countries. At this point of time, even with we were not really able to greatly succeed even with our Eastern European too. So we have just begun that journey. Let me say that on a part of it.
Okay. The other question is that I've always claimed that when you're competing against China, a company is competing against the nation. Like you said, there are a lot of incentives. The government is behind the companies to actually go global. So therefore, in India, in any free enterprise market, it's the company that actually competes against each other. But with China, it's a different ball game. So if you were to advise the Indian casting industry that if it would be difficult to take on China and the products that they are there, what is it that you think India should do in terms of maybe a product diversification or something else which actually gives India a head start against China, and it just doesn't become price as the competitive point?
A couple of things that comes to my mind to answer you, Sanjay. One is definitely there is a greater amount of mutual collaboration that I see with the Chinese suppliers. Like you rightly pointed out, it is a country as a whole. And let's say, if it's a cluster, there are definitely representatives in the Western communities for most of the Chinese foundry, and they don't look at as one supplier. They look at as a common supplier. They take a basket of components, and which might suit to one foundry, and other foundry will collaborate with them. So I would say that the value chain is much more stronger, which we need to probably look at that in India. How do we kind of make that value chain even more better? Number one. Number two, for a customer, especially talking about export side of it, for a customer being in the Western community, like I said in the talk, the speed to market is very, very crucial. The more and more quickly you are able to turn around, you are in for more and more projects. If that is where I think the benchmarking really goes on. So I think to look at beyond China, I would say these two would definitely really be very key to our success.
Okay, thank you. Vijayji, I think you can take over. There are some questions on the chat too. So I leave it to you now. You got to unmute yourself.
Mr. Praveen, there are so many questions because, as I said, that we all foundrymen, we all are very excited because of this pandemic to enter into this global market. My one very typical question, that being casting is a very integral engineering product, and I think even in Meritor, when you are approving a foundry or a foundry product, there are so many layers involved into it. And due to this pandemic, now the traveling is restrictive. So how do you think how a new foundry can enter into this?
So what we have done, Vijay, is that we know that this pandemic has put us into a kind of a stop on our travel. In our ability to approve new foundries is being a little bit restricted. But what we have done is we have gone into, like the whole world has gone in, we have gone into a virtual mode here too. So we have a virtual audit system that we deployed about a couple of months ago. We are in the, I would say we are not really a pioneer here because it's just about 3 months old now. So we are doing a lot of stuff on the video, and then educating the supplier in terms of how the audit needs to be, what we are exactly looking at on the audit side of it. So I would say one thing that has really emerged out of this is that even in the audit system, we have become much more transparent in terms of exactly what do we require, and also explaining the foundries or why do we require that, to the extent that we have gone and explained that these requirements are built in our system to avoid certain future deficiencies or defects that can come up in future. And to that level, we have gone into the transparency building here. So I would say that is not really stopping, but I can definitely admit you that it is delaying the process.
Any insight on impact of castings, automotive castings due to EV? How much this EV will affect this demand for automotive castings in the time to come?
Yes, thank you for reminding me. I actually forgot in my talk about EV. We have also separately kind of ventured out into the electrical vehicles and products on the EV side of it. We have a separate division. We joined hands with a technology partner on the electrical vehicles. To answer you, I think we have a good opportunity on the EV. In the commercial vehicle space, this is not a very high volume at this point of time. And also in terms of the let's say when the project will definitely come into the provision. It is taking time, but EV is beginning. We have already started in Meritor to look at our RFQs and then sending those cast components in India too. So we have essentially, we have launched nearly about 15 to 20 different products. And good part is the, let's say, the important components of the current non-EV products to the EV products, there is not much of a difference. And that is how we have packaged our product also and designed our products. So there is definitely an opportunity on the EV space for the foundries.
Mr. Praveen, you are having fantastic experience with the foundries in China and India. And your presentation gave a lot of new lights on the costing factor. I also, being a foundryman, would like to ask you that if in a very macro way we say that how Indian foundries should, because you said that the foundries, as far as the production capacities are concerned, there are 10 DISA lines and 2 are operative, 8 are not operative. That kind of manufacturing facilities they have made in China, which definitely we do not have. But how do you, what is in a very macro way you will suggest to the Indian foundrymen to do to outbid Chinese casting manufacturers?
Yeah, I know that I'm talking to the experts here. You are all foundrymen, and I think that you know this very well what to do. But I can tell you at a very high level to what I have seen there and here. I feel that the efficiencies in terms of the various processes, starting from melting till the product comes out, I feel that they are much more efficient in terms of, it could be in terms of deploying the labor, because as we know the labor cost in China is much more than what is in India.
Yep.
At least I would say anywhere between 25 to 30, 40% more than India. So there have been definitely a good amount of automation that has been there in China. I feel here we need to look at those automations, and every process, I think it needs to look at from the input and output angle of it and drive efficiencies. That is one thing that I can definitely make in comparison to what I have seen in the Chinese foundries and to Indians.
Can you throw any light on this centrifugal castings?
Oh, I'm sorry. No. I do not have much experience on the centrifugal castings. We do not buy in Meritor much. So okay. I need to pass this question.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Sanjay ji, now
okay, Vijay Dokane ji wanted to ask one question. I'm just yes, allowing him to unmute.
Please,
please go ahead. Please go ahead, Dokane.
Sir, good evening. I have a question. In Meritor's buying policy from India, are you open to buy from Pan India, or is there any locational choice that we can source only from this area? We are a foundry based in Jamshedpur. So
absolutely.
That's why I want to ask this question.
Absolutely no choice, as long as the way we work is a complete supply chain is managed by you. So if you are located anywhere in India, it is absolutely no problem.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thanks.
Okay. The question that I have is, I'm taking cue from what you said in terms of labor efficiency, right? Yeah, I mean, there are some issues and challenges that India faces in terms of productivity per labor when you compare, right? This is world over. I mean, even if you look at Japan, the productivity of labor is definitely way higher than the productivity of the Indian labor. And that is to do with the laws and things like that. So I wouldn't want to take even energy costs into the picture, because these are some facts that are there and we can't do anything much about it. How would you rate in terms of quality of the castings, China to India? If you have to rate it on a scale of 10, where would India and China come? Are we competitive in terms of quality of that we give, or are there a lot of improvements need to be done there? Because that's a very important point in the way forward?
Sanjay, in my experience, we are definitely on par. I would even put slightly an inch above Indian Foundries. Yeah, we do have some challenges in the quality of sand that we get. I know that this has been, especially on the surface side of it. But at the customer acceptance level, let me answer you like this. We tracked our PPMs in China and India very closely. Though we have more forgings, less castings, there it is more castings, less forgings. Despite that being more castings, I would say just on the casting side of it, we are definitely on par. If we kind of really put our brains together there and then focus on the customer side of it, I would say that we will not be any short of even a Western foundry.
Oh,
I
wow.
think definitely we can definitely look.
I think that's a very encouraging, point that comes across, and I think foundries will feel delighted on that. So we really need to cut inefficiencies in, areas which is what is actually draining us. Like in terms of ease of doing business, I think that's a big cost to India. In terms of shipping costs and things like that.
And then foundry being a capital intensive, your cost of capital is another that is really a kind of a holding in terms of specific investments that are needed.
Okay. The other thing that I want to ask you is that, Praveen, that everybody talks about US, okay, because it's the largest market and it's got huge volumes. Whereas our Indian share is still very, very low, okay? And if you are in the North American market you obviously have huge competition from China and price becomes a big barrier. Plus also our logistical cost is very high and things like that compared to China because of scale, etc. My question is that, are there other markets which are like, I call it the low-hanging fruits, right? Whether are there such markets which India can actually look at, which will give an easier access to Indian foundries to get and try and increase their share?
What I have gathered is, as we all know very obviously, is Europe and European Union. There is definitely Germany is definitely a very important element that we can look at it. I would have said Brazil in South America, but we have definitely a disadvantage in terms of their import costs, and also logistics is a big barrier for us. But leaving after the Europe, I would put Japan and Iran. There are a lot of exports opportunities that are going towards Iran now. Maybe those are all the areas that we need to look at. But in terms of really big ones, I would say European Union will be the next best one here.
Okay. So you're saying that, and you said that the quality is as good as for us. In terms of quality, we are as good. So it's a question of getting, the inefficiencies and like to the market, getting to the market quickly,
Yes.
Which is one of the very, very important turnaround of your samples and things like that needs to be really very fast.
Yeah.
So EU specifically, you're saying Germany, or are there any other markets?
I would say Germany is the first one in that, but there are definitely in the Europe, in France and Italy are next ones, but focus would be on Germany there.
Also, one more question, which could probably be among the last, is that with this pandemic, every country has become cautious in terms of protecting supply chains. How real is localization in these countries, especially Europe and US? Do you think they really can achieve? Because this is a long gestation in terms of setting up, and investments and pollution problems and things like that. So does casting industry in India have a threat to losing out to localization in time to come? It may not be immediate, but you think there would be investments coming in that area in EU and North America, or is it too early to say?
The threat that we really thought in the beginning of this pandemic is definitely an immediate reaction from the Western communities that we should be really looking at having a long distance supply chain in terms of dealing with such pandemics that can come anytime. But as I said in my earlier talk, I do not think that any country for that matter will be fully able to localize so quickly for many reasons. One is, of course, the investments that are needed, capacities that needs to be built in those regions. Number two, this pandemic is such a one, is not specific to any country. Even a very short supply chain also can get disrupted with such a thing. And then we have been a part of the a global supply chain, not just for merely supplying the components, but also offering technological solutions, right? And that is where I think we still are in a good shape. Last one that I would say that even if it at a 50% or even a 40, anything even 25% layered capacities too, we are still having that opportunity available to us. Given that we are such a low portion of the global trade, we are still able to manage that.
Okay, so that's a very hopeful. I mean, that's a very good point, because it gives us hope that even if there's localization, there's still hope that India can penetrate, and there will still be those gaps, which whatever you do will still remain.
As I speak, I can tell you that we are now in Meritor building a plan to double our exports from India in the next 5 years. So that can speak of.
Okay.
I mean, one thing, what Sanjay ji was saying in continuation to that localization, but what I also feel, what is your opinion, that the foundries in Europe and USA, they were mostly dependent on the American foundries were depending upon the Mexican labors, European foundries were depending upon the East European labors. So isn't it a fact that this COVID, because the migration of labor had taken place, borders are sealed, and now, as usual, those labors will be very difficult to come back. So the existing production or pre-COVID production of castings in those foundries, those will not come up in that ratio back. And so I feel, will not there be a better demand for the castings from Indian foundries?
Yes, it's too early to say, because the way we are handling the migrant labor in India, I think they are much more better in managing the migrant.
Yes.
So I think, for example, some of our foundries were able to come back both in Europe and North America pretty quickly than what we were able to do it in India. So I would say that will be looked upon as we go forward. It's such a pandemic that can arise at any point of time. But at this stage, I'm not finding that as to be a major threat or major opportunity.
Thank you.
Just a small question. Please, Sanjay.
There are two questions on the chat box which I thought is relevant and I can ask. This is again related to China. One of the questions is from Mr. Mukherjee. He says that in China, there have been uncertainties related to pollution, and there were a lot of units which are supposed to close. So he wants to know, is this reliable? And does this make China unreliable?
Yeah. Yes, this happens typically in winter. We have gone through this cycle for the last several years. Especially in winter, there is a close down, and also it depends on specific states, specific province, especially the ones which are much more closer to Beijing, and there is some political meeting that is happening, and they want to show that it is no environmental threat. At that time, there are temporary closure of foundries that we have always seen. And what the good thing that they do, while all these are unknown, and in anticipation, both the supplier and the customers, we managed to build inventories so that those shutdown periods are taken care. However, there were some foundries, because they were not able to manage environmentally extremely poorly controlled, and those have been shut down. Okay, that I have seen, at least I would say this has really put them out of nearly about, probably about 8 to 10% of their capacity must have been out of place now because of the environmental regulations. But at the same time, I have also witnessed that foundries are coming back. They are investing on implementing environmental friendly equipments in order to counter this. And that is also happening in China. So,
okay. So just for the benefit of the industry, if suppose a company comes to you today, right, a new foundry, what would be the typical time frame for him to actually submit, start the conversation to actually, given that all conditions are fulfilled by the foundry, what is the cycle you think that a foundry would have to undergo? Because I think there is a cycle which is required and a time frame, just for the foundries to understand that, okay, it's not that he walks in today and Praveen likes his face, so he gives it to him and tomorrow you start. It's not that. So,
okay. I will answer this in 3 elements and 3 milestones: to receive an RFQ, to get an award of business, or receive an RFQ, to get qualified, and receive an award of business. These 3 elements I'll answer. To get an RFQ, probably 2 weeks, because I'm one that I'm kind of hugely pushing on speed to market, so we need to be. So it's about 2 weeks, and then getting qualified, I would say that it might take about anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks, and then getting awarded can be about 3 months. Because if it is really coming into our strategy of in terms of making sure that both in terms of capability and as a business case feasibility, if that all comes up, I think in about 3 months we should have them a program awarded.
okay, that's fabulous. The other question is that, which came up in other earlier talks, was in terms of the credit line. What's the kind of credit lines that you think? I mean, if it's too specific, you can choose not to answer it. But at a macro level, what do you think are the kind of working capital requirements that a foundry would typically need?
Most of the global customers operate on, some call it as SOMI, supplier operated managed inventory. We call it as vendor managed inventory. The Indian supplier or a Chinese supplier is treated on par with a supplier who is next door. So I'll be picking up the parts like the way a supplier supplies next door. You are treated on the same way as far as our supply chain is concerned. So from that perspective, safely, and we operate in a very transparent model in terms of consumptions and demand and things like that. I would say in a very ballpark number, about 120 days of working capital
is what is required.
What is required. But as you know, most of you may be knowing, there are a very good operating financial schemes available on when you are exporting at a very, very competitive at a global interest levels. So many of our suppliers are able to manage this, I would say, relatively easily to this 120 days.
I think we're still at, I think 3 or 4% above LIBOR, I think, in India still. 3%.
No, but then we go to specifics, but I can tell you, like the way we are looking at suppliers to be on par with any other local suppliers, I think the international financing is definitely an opportunity to India.
Right. And of course, you can hedge dollar and things like that. So that, I mean, you need to work that out at an individual level.
Absolutely. And we help them. We help our suppliers to understand, make them understand and things like that.
Yeah. Okay. This, I think, could be the last question. I think we have exceeded our 1 hour, 60 minutes time frame. In terms of tonnage, I don't know whether you can answer that. What is the kind of tonnage that you think you would be looking at going forward in the next 5 years? Do you think you can answer that, or you think it could be difficult?
I don't know.
Okay. I'll put it the other way. What is the minimum tonnage foundry that you would look at, and you wouldn't want to go below that? I think that's probably a more relevant question. In terms of size, I mean, I'm sure you'd want to operate with, foundries which are at a particular size and you may not want to go below that. Is that something you would like to answer? I mean, not sure.
Is that are you looking at my answer to be on the capacity of the foundry?
Yeah.
Okay. So I will tell you, we don't look at the capacity of the foundry to begin with. All we need is we are extremely cautious in approving a non-high pressure molding line foundry.
Oh, okay. That actually is a good answer, because that kind of gives us an insight into what is required. Because it's important that the expectations are set well before they even come to you. Otherwise, it would be a waste of time for.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think we have kind of there's one last question. Which are foundries which are using 3D printing for samples? Are there foundries which are using?
He wanted to ask if there are any foundries in China who are using 3D printing to make samples so that becomes faster.
Yeah. Yes.
So is that a way forward for India also?
I've not seen. I've seen barring about 2-3 foundries in China using the 3D printing. But let me tell you, that has not been their major success for speed to market.
The sampling part in China is really, very fast.
Yeah, very fast. Yes.
Okay, so thank you so
much. And now I request Vijayji to propose the vote of thanks. Oh, so Kupswami.
Mr. Kupswami.
I just put on the poll. I request all of you to kindly vote for the.
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Please, Mr. Kupswami, please start.
Yeah, thank you, President. Good evening, everyone. I have immense pleasure to propose the vote of thanks. On behalf of the NOBs, my sincere thanks to Mr. Praveen for accepting our request and sharing a wonderful presentation on export. As our President and Speaker told, there are plenty of opportunities for Indian casting manufacturers for exporting their products. But the time available for capturing the market is too short. Okay? I'm sure that the insightful presentation by Mr. Praveen today will guide our members to penetrate the export market in a big way. Okay? But as Mr. Praveen told, it is not an easy task unless we improve all the efficiencies of all our processes. And I would like to thank all our NOBs for helping us to conduct this webinar. In particular, our Mr. Pradeep, our treasurer, who spends a lot of his valuable time for organizing the webinars on behalf of IIF. My special thanks to all the directors for marketing this webinar. And finally, my hearty thanks to all our members for their participation in today's webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you. And special thanks to Mr. Prem for organizing this wonderful.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know. Thank you, Prem.
Thank you, Prem, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Praveenji, there are one small thing, like a lot of people are putting in private messages to me for your contact details. So how do I get it, and is it okay for us to share?
I will share that with you, and then you can.
Yeah, I'll do that. Thank you so much, Praveenji.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr.